What on earth? Good morning, Wonu.
Good morning. I can't see these days. I really actually can't. I'm just lying to myself. But anyway.
What are they? Are they prescription glasses?
They will be soon.
I love them, though. I do love them. But
I'm trying them out. But these are the things I want to get
Good
to.
morning, Joy. How are you? Oh my gosh, Wonu, that's amazing. I love them. I think I need to get a pair like that myself. But can you see through them?
Yes, very well.
Oh, okay. I tried to take off my glasses earlier. I don't know if you saw, but I couldn't see anything on the screen, so I had to put them back on. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So, welcome to Hangout Cafe.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
You sound a bit low, Wonu. I don't know if can everyone hear Wonu?
Okay, hang on a second.
Just your volume. We can see you.
I suspect it's because my phone is standing upright and my microphone is at the bottom. Yes, I should have thought about that. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I can hear you better. Thank you, Design Coco. Okay, great. Joy says the sound is good. I forget says it's good. So fantastic. Okay. Well, welcome to Hangout Cafe.
Thank you.
You are one of the few that we have allowed to come back.
Oh, thank you so much. And Pastor Funke, thank you so much for having me back. God bless you. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. Thank you. And thank you, Tenoke, for taking the session today.
Okay, well, there you go. Please, I don't know, somebody said, I can't remember who it was, said they couldn't hear me properly, that Wonu was fine, I wasn't so fine. So are we okay? Are we both okay now? We can hear you well. I don't know if that was before or after. Anyway, let's go ahead. We'll hear if they say anything. So, you're back.
Yes.
This time you're going to tell us about something you do pretty much professionally, I think.
Yes. Trying.
Thank you, Renix. So it's now a slightly different type of conversation that we're going to have today. But before we go ahead and start, I think that you should introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you. Thank you, guys. You can hear us both. I've seen all your messages. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Go ahead, Wonu.
Okay. As I said, good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to be here on Hangout Cafe. My name is Wonu Yoloye. I work in communications and PR. Very passionate about communications, getting information out there to people who necessarily don't want to hear it, but, you know, and those that want to hear it too. I'm married to a lovely, lovely gentleman called Mr. Bolaji Yoloye, and we have 3 children together. Been married now for 18 years. I don't feel old enough to be married for 18 years, but yes. And yes, that's like a short bio on who I am.
Okay, fantastic. I can tell that you're not used to big glasses because you're...
I know. Sorry.
Those of us that wear glasses, like the norm, we don't, we're not like this.
I'm going to try not to touch it so I don't detract from what I'm saying. I'll try not to touch it again. Okay.
No. Please feel free. Knock yourself out. Okay. Okay. So we're talking about creative storytelling. So no. I've changed the name. Impactful storytelling. Yeah. I've already changed the name. We haven't even started. Impactful storytelling.
Oh, my days.
And I think basically the whole point of this is to know how to tell a story in a way that it captivates people, it impacts them. So the thing that I'm going to ask is, why is that important? Why do we have to tell a story in a way that is captivating? Why is that an issue at all?
Thank you so much for that. Yes, so I mean, I guess maybe I should go back a little bit and just sort of talk about how I came to be the person to have this conversation. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm married to a lovely gentleman called Bolaji Yoloye, and last year he had a cardiac arrest, collapsed in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday afternoon in our house, ended up being in the hospital for 5 months, and by the sheer grace of God, by a miracle, literally, he's alive today. And I think back in May, we came on the Hangout Cafe to tell our story and share our testimony. And I guess Pastor Funke thought I told the story well enough that she invited me to come back. So, I mean, I'm assuming everyone here has heard the testimony. And if you haven't, please let us know in the comments, and I will give you a short whistle-stop tour on what happened when Bolaji had the event, as we like to call it. So yes, what makes a story impactful? I mean, today I think I just want to give you tips on, what everyone has a story. We all have a story to tell. We all have a message we want to get across. We all have things that we're doing in our lives that will be of benefit to somebody else. And I think just communicating that across in a way where you don't lose your audience is key. So to answer your questions, because we all have a story, we all have a background, we all have experiences, we all have things that we're going through. I think it's important to get your message across in a way that your audience will benefit from what you're trying to say, and also will be impacted by your story.
Okay, I've just seen that Joy said she hasn't heard the story. So Joy, it was actually an interview on Hangout Café, so you can go back and watch it. But during this, at some point, Wonu is going to be referring to it on and off anyway, so you'll probably get the gist of it. But if you wanted to watch the whole interview, Apology was there for the interview. So it's good to just go onto YouTube, Oluadiaga Hangout Café, and have I'm sure you know where it is, so you can have a watch. Okay, so if I wanted to tell a story, I mean, first of all, I think, like you said, everybody does have a story, and we do. I think everybody's story is important.
Yes,
but I do think that some stories can appear to not be so important because of the way they're delivered.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Absolutely.
I'm looking at you gave me a list of points that you should do, and your first one here say, what is your story about?
Yes.
How do I know? I have a story, right? But the honest truth is I have like a million stories. Do you know what I mean? So I have to, how do I know which story to, what's my first step? So I have a story to tell, but which story do I tell? How do I go on?
So, I mean, so your million stories will all probably be relevant, because the truth is somebody somewhere is going to connect to something in your story that is going to spur them on to be the next best thing, to come out of the comfort zone that they're in, come out of their shell, to do a lot of us, stories have been on our mind that we want to share, there's a lot inside of us, that we want to share, but we don't know how to go about it. So I think everyone's story is important. I think sometimes we assume that, who wants to hear this? And you'd be surprised. You honestly would be surprised by who would want to hear your story. I was thinking earlier when I was prepping for this, and I was thinking about a friend of mine who is a tax consultant. And, when I hear the word tax, literally, I shut down. Everything after that word, I'm not even listening to you. But, there is a story behind why she decided to become a tax consultant. And, if she were to write a book, for example, the truth is there will be a lot of people that will want to know about, because in her book, I assume she will write about, if you don't want to hire an accountant to do your taxes, this is what you need to do. So, even that story is important. There's always somebody out there that wants to hear your story. And I think I've just written down, as you mentioned, some key points on how to deliver a story. And your story doesn't have to be something emotional that happened to you. I just mentioned tax just to give you like the other end of the
boring story.
Exactly. That could be the most boring thing, but the truth is somebody out there will connect to what you're trying to share and they will run with it. So when you think about the story that you want to get across, narrow down the key elements of your story. What are you trying to communicate in your story? So as you said earlier, I will refer to Bolaji's accident quite a bit as I'm in this session. So when, Pastor Funke invited us to come back and to come and share our testimony, I sort of wrote down, what kind of key elements I wanted to get across. So, for example, I knew I had to start off with, Bolaji doesn't have any medical history. It was a regular Saturday afternoon. It wasn't that he had a heart problem that we had been going to the hospital about. It was nothing. He didn't have a headache. He didn't have anything. So I knew I had to start off with a history of, how the event was just such a shock to our systems. And the only way to deliver that is to say to people that there's no history of anything in our family. I knew I had to have a middle part of my story because the story, it was a 5-month-long journey in the hospital. We're still on it by the grace of God. But I knew that in the middle of the story, I would have to keep my audience engaged. If I had started talking about what I ate at some point in the day of the story, if your story isn't relevant to food poisoning on how your stomach was pumped, then people don't really need to know what you had in the afternoon, in the middle of your story. So I knew that there was a crescendo in the middle of my story for me, where the medical people came to me and they said, "Have you considered turning off the machine?" In other words, of your husband, if he was not going to have a great quality of life. I knew that that was a key part of the story. I knew I had to also bring in how there were moments when I knew that, every God was in it by sending a cleaner to my house. So I knew those were relevant parts of my story, and I knew I had to join those dots. And I knew that at the end, when, he came home, walked into the house, having been driven out in an ambulance, was also key to the story. So I had identified, key elements of the story that I needed to communicate. And I made sure that I did that. I also narrowed down a couple of, what do I want people to take away, from the story. So, I had said that, by God's grace, Bolaji will come out of the coma that he was in at the time. And any opportunity I had to shout to the world how God delivered us from this horrible thing that happened to us, I would take the opportunity. So that was a takeaway I had. Also, in the middle of that whole episode, we had some financial issues and how I had to pay to access my husband's account. So I'm going to sidebar slightly, people here. Relationships in a marriage, Balaji and I have been married, as I said. And we had, we did that joint account thing when they tell you to have a joint account, right? When you first get married. So we have a joint account that has 0.16p inside. 0.16, literally. So clearly we don't use the joint account, right? So I have my account, he has his account. I knew the PIN number of his cards, but I didn't have access to the account. I wasn't named on the account. And so, I knew I had to share that as a takeaway to say, please be open and honest in your relationships to at least have financial access to each other's account. I called the bank and the bank said to me, yes, you're married. Yes, this is your name. But I've looked on your husband's account and he doesn't mention anywhere here that if anything happened to him, we should give you access. So please, ladies.
We don't even think about that. Like, why would that be a thing?
Exactly. In the end, I had to pay almost £400 to the courts to grant me access. And obviously, because of COVID, everything took so long. So sidebar, I know it's not the main focus point of this conversation, but please, 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 for those of us in relationships, please have open and honest relationships with your partners, not because they're going to spend the money or for whatever fear you may have of having, your own separate account, just, so you can have access in days of emergencies. And I know it's not something that we all think about, but it happened to me and I had to pay somebody else to grant me access. So that was really scary. So those were two important things I wanted to get out as well.
There should always be something that the people are going to leave with. Now, one of the things that you say here is know your audience. And I think I struggled a bit with this.
Yes.
Because I feel, and I need you to just talk through this, I feel like sometimes there's a story that you will tell and we don't know how, you don't necessarily know who your audience is going to be. You could have an audience out there that you don't know. So you can't really tailor to your audience. If you're telling the story, why do you have to know who your audience is? So that was my thing with that. So if you can talk a little on that, please.
So, in PR, when you're writing so I'm writing a press release, for example. So press release, they tell you to have the 5 W's: who, what, when, why. I can't remember what the fifth one, I think it's how. And, if I was going when, who, what, when, what, how, it is how. And if I write a press release, for example, I have to have those salient points in there. If I'm writing a blog, I don't really have to have all of the salient points in there because I'm going to lose my audience. So it's important to know who you're writing for, who you're talking to. if you know who you're talking to, then you can introduce anecdotes to your conversation that your audience will connect with. So let me give you another example. So when I came on Hangout Cafe the first time and I was sharing the testimony, because I knew a lot of the audience, not all, as you said, it's not going to be everyone. I knew a lot of the audience was Christian. I knew a lot of them, a few of them would be Nigerians. So it was important for me to share this part of the testimony. So when my husband first collapsed, I remember when the paramedics were working on him, I said to myself, find a Bible scripture and start quoting that scripture so you can pray it over him. And to the glory of God, I did not have a single scripture, not one. But I said, but I know the name Jesus and I'm going to call Jesus. And that is what I did. Now, I've since shared this same testimony with football moms. I've shared with mothers in my children's school who I knew were not Christians and may not necessarily get the reference. So there was no point in adding that to the story that I was telling them because it would have been lost on them. So, you know, knowing who I was speaking to allowed me to, you know, add elements of the story that built it up in some respect and or made it more relevant in some respects. Now, obviously, to a wider audience, you know, some people are going to pick it up and some are not going to pick it up. But I'm going to try and focus on the majority of people that I'm trying to speak to. So I'm going to go back to my tax reference. If, for example, a friend of mine was writing a book on tax consultancy, she's probably going to break down how to calculate your tax, because the people that are going to buy the book are the people that are going to want to calculate their tax, right? If, however, she decides to write the book and glosses over how to calculate your tax, she's lost her audience. The majority of people that she was trying to reach in writing the book, she's lost them. So I think it's really important to know who you're talking to. You know, in comms, we call it having an avatar. For example, I'll use another example. If you're watching daytime TV, the average daytime person at home before COVID, it's probably all changed. It has changed actually since COVID, but the average person watching TV, daytime TV, pre-COVID, retired, just, you know, they're not even doing school runs. So even if you caught them at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they'd still be watching TV. So a lot of the shows were geared towards those women, but they had to know who was home to be able to put those kind of shows on. As I said, obviously, you're not going to catch everyone, but you're going to catch the majority. So I think it's important to know who you're talking to, and then your story will be more impactful to the majority. It will still bless or be impactful to the minority, but, you know, your focus is on the majority.
So you could also have a successful, impactful story that you tell that when you don't know the audience, you could still have that.
100%. 100%, absolutely. There's going to be somebody that, you know, you just didn't even know that this was relevant to them. You're not going to have an idea because I mean, how long is a piece of string? So there are going to be hundreds of people that are going to listen to what you have to say. Someone's going to take one thing or the other. You don't know what they're going to take away. So by all means, put it all in there, but know who the majority of people are that you're talking to.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Dr. Amber, thank you very much. Receiving your love. Dami, it is not being recorded, but it will be available to replay on Hangout_the Cafe later on to answer your questions. Okay, now the next thing you've put on here is do not speak too quickly. And I'm so guilty of this because I speak so fast. You know, sometimes I remember when I first came to this country and my sister and I would speak to each other and they didn't think we were speaking English just because of the speed at which we spoke, you know. So I still have to slow myself down all the time. Why is this important?
So something I've been doing a lot recently is so, you know, we're in the age of voice notes. Even though really I have an embargo when you send me voice notes, it can be longer than 2 minutes, which you have broken a lot of the time.
But I have to fight this thing. I cannot be breaking every 2 minutes. If the information and the gist is 10 minutes long, do you want 5 voice notes?
Yes.
2 minutes each.
Yes.
But how does that make sense? I mean, the minute I have to remember where I stopped to start again. No.
Yeah. But what if I don't have 10 minutes at that point in time to listen to your whole 10-minute voice note?
When you come back.
No, don't send me 10 minute voice notes.
Then you can
Yes,
just listen to them. But you should have
exactly.
explained that you didn't get your message across, but you just said you can't leave me a voice note over 2 minutes.
That's fair. But have you seen those memes where people, when they start leaving voice notes, then they talk about how they are walking and they saw the sun shining on the left-hand side?
My
And
voice notes are very sweet. Tell the
exactly.
truth. My voice notes are very sweet. The gist is correct. So it's not as if, why you eye rolling your eyes?
Back to the main story. No, so as I was saying, something I've started doing a lot recently is listening to myself when I send voice notes to people like Pidoke. Because I want to check that I didn't mumble. So like you, when I first came to this country, my sisters and I have 2 sisters. We speak really quickly. And so like you, when we first came, would be speaking with each other and people would say, "What language are you guys speaking?" And we look at them like, "Are you deaf or something?" But it wasn't until later that we realized that, one, we were speaking really quickly, and two, obviously we were speaking with a Nigerian accent, or or whatever. So now what I do is I tend to listen. I listen back to if I send a voice note to somebody, because if you mumble, people can't understand what you're saying. If you speak too quickly, people can't follow what you're saying. If you're trying to tell a story, you need to carry your audience along. If at some point they're like, "Oh no, what did she say?" Then they spend the next minute trying to figure out what you said the minute before, and so they miss what you said the minute after. So I, especially because I'm guilty of it, I always remind myself, don't speak too quickly. Enunciate your words. It's important to enunciate every single word. I have a feeling I started off speaking too quickly at the beginning of this session, but now that we've talked about that point, I'm gonna slow it down. So it's just
for argument's sake, with a voice note, you can rewind it. So you can
yes.
listen, even if you missed that one
Oh my
minute, you
God.
can rewind it.
Okay, you can send me 10-minute voice notes. That's only you.
No, it's okay, I won't.
So no, but voice notes, yes, you can rewind, but on a session like this, I don't have the opportunity to rewind. I would have lost people, and all well and good. People can go back and listen again. Oh, our darling host, we can't hear you. They said. Someone said that. Design Coco.
Okay, Design Coco, can you hear me now? Can you guys let me know if you can hear me? I didn't change anything, so I'm hoping that it was.
Maybe the Wi-Fi dropped. Okay, I'll keep going, and then hopefully the sound will come back. Yeah, so it's really just conversation etiquette, I suppose. I mean, even if I'm having a face-to-face conversation with somebody, I need to be mindful that because I speak quickly anyway, I need to slow down my conversation, just so people can follow what you're saying. Imagine if you're delivering a joke and then you deliver the punchline and then you're wondering why people haven't laughed. Because they didn't hear what you said. So exactly. So no, it's important to just learn, to slow it down and enunciate your words so that people can follow your story.
Okay, fantastic. Design Coco, everyone else seems to be able to hear, so maybe try putting your volume up and see if that helps.
Sorry,
Okay,
can I just mention my own mug while you're mentioning mugs? I didn't have a sisterhood one and I didn't have a Hangout Cafe one. So this one just says my name. Sorry, my vanity is much. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Okay.
I said I was using bedroom voice. Please, Nke, what is bedroom voice? I don't even. Anyway, please. I think they can hear me, but I was using bedroom voice first. Okay, I'm going to start shouting now. I'm assuming that bedroom voice is low. I just speak low. You all should leave me alone. Okay. Now, the other thing that you've got here is don't overwhelm your audience with every single detail of your story. Now, you referred to this earlier, slightly. You spoke about what you ate, etc.
Yes.
How do you know? Because sometimes those details are.
Yes.
And how do you know what details are the right details? Do you know what I mean? Because you're saying
absolutely.
don't overwhelm me with every detail, but you said, what was the detail you gave us? You gave us some detail, which was kind of brilliant. How do you know which details to pick out? And why are you not interested in what I ate? What if it was the best prawn cocktail I'd had?
But does it make your story more impactful? So ask yourself a question. So whatever detail you give, whatever information you put across, is it going to have an impact on your story? As I said, if your story doesn't have to do with how your stomach was maybe pumped at a later point, you know, or how you got food poisoning, then maybe reconsider adding something like what you ate. Let me give you an example. I'm going to do an example of 2 stories, and then it will be more relevant.
Before you do that, can I just ask this question? Because I think where you have, you said, is it going to be impactful to the person? So it's almost like, is impact general? Is it generic? So what is impactful to you? Is it going to be impactful to me necessarily? How do I know it's going to be impactful to you?
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because then don't put it if it's not going to be impactful. But how do you know that it won't be impactful to me? I might just want to know where to get the best prawn cocktail.
That's fair enough. But when I decided to share the story, I knew what I wanted to share. I knew what the salient points were. I knew the impact I wanted to get across. I knew what part of the message I needed to get across to who I was speaking to. So because I already have that in mind, I then need to decide what part of the story is going to build up the final message. So, you know, because I said the takeaways were things like the financial side of it and how, you know, you should be opening your relationship, and how, even though the doctors had written my husband off, to the glory of God, he's still alive. Those were the 2 things I wanted to get across when I was sharing the story initially. Now, what I ate, not necessarily.
So, I think Gillian put it, I don't know if you saw Gillian's thing there where she said to the story as opposed to
what is your why of the story? That's like, who said? I didn't see what Gillian said.
Oh, Gillian said to the story rather than to the person.
Yes, exactly. So,
hello, Emma. Emma is on here. Emma, she said we are her 2 favorite people. Hi, Emma.
Hi, Enzu. So I'll give you an example. So, so the first time I met Tinuke, gosh, a long time ago. Jojo is 11 years ago, just before. Yeah. And when I met her, she was pregnant with her youngest daughter. Oh yeah, sorry, no. So no. I'll do the background and then I will tell the story. So when I met her, she was pregnant with her last daughter now. She's got 4 kids, by the way, guys. She looks amazing. Okay, so I'm gonna share how we became friends in 2 different ways. So the first way is this. So the first time I met Tinuke, I walked into the office and I thought, oh wow, who is this amazing looking woman? You know, this must be her first child because she looks so young. So this must be her first child. I'm on my 3rd child. This is all stuff I was building up in my head, by the way. At this point, I hadn't said anything to Tinuke. So this must be her first child. This is her first child. This is my 3rd. I'm on my 3rd. Maybe I can give her advice. You know, I wonder how she's doing. Or maybe I should just go ahead and say hello to her. But maybe I don't want to say hello to her because, you know, she's busy. And then someone comes into the room and says hello to her. And then I continue saying to myself, oh, she sounds so lovely. This whole time, I haven't said anything to Tinuke. I'm still just, you know, marinating all this in my head. So this is me telling you the story. Or I could come at you and say, oh my goodness, the first time I met Tinuke, I just thought she was this out of the world character. She, unknown to me, was on her 4th child. And I was like, oh my goodness, how do you have 4 children? And then what made it worse is that she told me that she wanted 3 more after this. Like, who does that? Can you see how those 2 stories were different?
Yeah, they were different, but also, I mean, they were different. The first one was actually quite boring, but I think also you were more animated in the second one, so you kind of made it more exciting.
Exactly.
Just in the way speaking about it.
But that's all part of it. So, you know, in getting your message across, it's not just what you're saying. So your body language, you know, I try not to, I think there's a part where I talk about using your hands. I try not to use my hands too much, but sometimes I get really animated. But it's all part of delivering the story. So, you know, it's how you come with it, you know, the energy that you bring. Obviously, if it's a somber story, then don't come all animated and alive, you know, but if it's an exciting one, then come with that energy. If it's a somber story, you know, tone it down, get your message across, make sure your words are doing more of the talking. If it's an ending, bring all of it in and bring all your energy in. So your delivery, I guess, is really the point, that particular point. Your delivery is just as important as what you're saying. And yeah, I mean, that feeds into, sorry to cut you off, that also feeds into what the salient points are. I didn't need to tell the audience what was going on in my head, how, somebody else came to say hello to Tinuke that day while I was still trying to figure out, it wasn't relevant to, the amazing person that you are, or how we became friends, or, or how we met. So, delivery matters, what you're saying matters, how you say it matters. Because at the end of the day, you just need that story to get across, and you need your why. Thank you to whoever mentioned your why. You need your why you're sharing the story to come across as well.
Okay, so I guess that means that to a certain extent, well, I mean, not to a certain extent, the storyteller controls the story and the way they tell it and what they decide to tell, etc. So my question previously, when I was saying how do you know whether it will impact me, is almost irrelevant in the sense that it's down to the storyteller to decide where they want to go with the story.
I guess the narrator owns it. So it's, the way you narrate, and that is not just the words. As I said, whatever else you bring along with it is relevant.
So you said something, you mentioned it now, it's also one of your points where you said minimize hand gestures, I think is what you said, minimize hand gestures, because they can be a distraction. But you also say somewhere further down that you need to be authentic. And I mean, I talk with my hands all the time, constantly, So how do you balance that, where you're keeping you're being real, but at the same time, you're not being distracting people too much? How do you know what's too much? Because I personally think that this works. What do you think?
But saying that you've hardly used your hands today.
That's because I have used them, but they're off screen.
Well,
so you can't see them.
Yeah. So your hands have not distracted me, basically, is what I'm saying. So you can definitely be yourself. Yourself is an animated person. But again, maybe back to the point I made just before. If your hands are going to be a distraction from your story, then you not using your hands for half an hour or 20 minutes does not detract from the authentic person that you are. The authenticity is about, you come vulnerable. You don't try to embellish the story with anything that maybe didn't happen really in the story. The story, calls for you to be vulnerable. You're vulnerable. You're not trying to be this other person that. And you know the funny part? If I'm not a person that just gesticulates and I do it, it's going to be obvious. Because you're not being yourself. Be yourself, but also remember that you're having a conversation with somebody, in this case, a group of people. And the most important thing for me, when I was sharing my testimony initially, was that those 2 points that I had set aside that I wanted to get across will come across. So I guess because I knew why I was sharing the story, because I knew what I wanted to get across, it was important for me to just be aware of conversation etiquettes, as I mentioned earlier. Don't if I had come on here with eyeliner up the hair,
glasses, your lenses are distracting me entirely.
But I don't understand. That's just a regular thing.
But I think that's because I'm not used to them on you.
Fair
so
enough.
Someone who doesn't know you probably won't be distracted by them. But I'm just
Fair
like,
enough.
I'm like all of this. I love them, but as I'm spending a lot of time,
Fair enough.
I like these lenses.
Fair enough. Fair. No, I hear that. But because you're trying to get a message across. That's the focal point. That's your job for that conversation. That's it. You're completely and wholly focused on delivering your message. Whatever is going to take away from it, however long you're telling that message, you can decide to put your hands down, for example. It doesn't make you less of yourself. You're not being less authentic because in the next 20 minutes, you haven't used your hands to make a point. So, I just think you can, be vulnerable. I'm going to refer to the lovely Miss Christina Ojo. I didn't want to forget. I don't know if you guys saw when she came on the Hangout Café, and she shared her, I think it's multiple sclerosis. I think she shared her journey. And I remember watching that session and crying. I've never met her before. I don't know her till this day. But she was so genuine. She was how she talked about how, when she was younger, she focused so much on work, she was just so genuine. And I thought her story hit me so much because of how genuine and authentic she was. It is, and somebody's going to stop it in a minute. Yeah, sorry about that. So I just think that's a great example of how to be authentic, how to be yourself. There were times when she laughed when the story called for her to laugh. There were times where she was just outright, I really wish I hadn't done that, and I could relate to it. So come with your authentic self. People,
she's sending you love. As she
yes,
is, yeah.
people love you for who you are. Don't try to be anyone else. Your story will mean more when you come from a place where you're vulnerable. I think the fact that I was able to say that I didn't have access to my husband's account, and we had a joint account that had 16p in it. I wouldn't ordinarily say that to anyone. My sisters probably don't have that information. But it was relevant to the story. It was relevant to what I was trying to get across, especially because, I couldn't, make payments for anything. So it was important for that element of my story to come out. And I needed to be honest enough with myself to bring that across. So, it's just when you're sharing stories like that anyway, you're sharing a piece of yourself with the world. Just go all in. Don't hold back, because when it comes across, people are gonna be like, really? I didn't get that. I didn't get that from her. Especially the people that know you, they're gonna text you afterwards to be like, but really? So, and you're accountable to God anyway. Well, I am. So it's important to just, be vulnerable, be yourself. Who you are is absolutely fine. That's one thing I want to get across today. Who you are is absolutely fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong. Not to say you're perfect, but your story is just as important as mine is. For example, you have a lot to share. You have a lot going on with you that you would not believe who will benefit from it. Trust me. But there's someone out there waiting for you to share that story, because they need your story to know that, oh my gosh, if she can do it, then I can do it. And so please don't shy away. There's something in all of us that is just gagging to be shared. So please, if you have the opportunity, my advice, my advice to you would be to go ahead and share it. Pastor Funke just said the cleaner part made her cry. So I'm going to share that really quickly. Whilst my husband was in the hospital, so he's a breadwinner in our house, and a lot of the payments that we make come from his account. And as I said earlier, I didn't have access to the accounts. I had his bank cards, but obviously I couldn't just be going to the bank to be withdrawing large sums of cash, especially because I had called the bank to ask for access, and they said no. So if they had seen large sums of money coming out through the ATM, I didn't want anything to block, the little access that I did have. And so one particular morning, I had sent a message to my cleaner to say, I know you're due to come next week, but unfortunately, because my husband's in the hospital, I'm not going to be able to pay you. So, once things are back to normal, then, I will reach out. It was a low point, to be fair. It was a really low point, because I just thought, simple things like just making payments, I just couldn't make them. And as well as dealing with that, I was dealing with the fact that the doctors had said, have you ever thought about what would happen if your husband was not going to make it? Have you ever thought of switching off the machine? So it was a really low point. And I sent that message that day, and I just thought, well, it is what it is. And I think it was the evening of that day, my cousin, who I probably interact with maybe 3 or 4 times a year, sent me a message, and she said, "Cuz, I'm sending a cleaner to your house next week. Let me know what day you want her to come." And I remember crying so hard that day, as I cried, because that's when I knew God was in it. But up until then, I knew it was, but you know how you know something, and then and then you know something. And I was just thinking, cleaner, you know enough to know that I canceled my cleaner this morning, and now a cleaner is coming to my house next week. And she was just like, obviously she offered to pay and all of that. And it was the most humbling experience of my life. I can't even lie. I was just so humbled that, okay, God, we're in this together. Just that he knew what was going on with me. It was just so fascinating to me. I was I was blown away, to be honest, because I thought we pray and we know that God is in our affairs, but in that moment, I feel like God was just with me in the room that I was in that day, and he was talking to me, and it was just such a humbling experience for me. So that kind of detail I felt was salient as well in my story, because as I said, at the start, one of the takeaways was that miracles still happen and God is in it. So I had to share that because there's no other way. That it was too random to be a coincidence. It was just so far and wild. So I had to share that as part of the story, because it just meant God is in the details. He's in everything. And when I shared that, I think on the day I was sharing it, I was still crying. It's still humbling to this day. Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I will never get over it, ever. Yes.
Yeah, so those are the type of details that make the difference.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let me see. What else have we got on this? Okay. You've kind of covered. Oh, you said we should practice the story beforehand. Guys, if you have any questions or anything you want to ask Wonu, please put them in I was going to say in the question box. I think you have access to the question box. Please put them in the question box so that I can pick them up. But yeah, so why practice? Why practice? Because I feel like sometimes, I mean, I get that you need to practice to, come across okay, but sometimes I feel like, you can over rehearse that by the time you deliver, it seems too rehearsed.
Yes, that's fair.
I don't know.
But then you can also under rehearse. So, in comms, they tell us, I'm in communication, in comms, they tell us, write everything down. Know exactly what you're going to say. Don't ever be caught off guard. Because when you're caught off guard, you start umming and erring. And after, so, one of the reasons also why I record myself is to hear how many ums and ahs I put in my conversations. Because then you know that it's at the back of your mind. You need to reduce how many and errands you're doing. And the only reason why you and err is because you're buying time to fill that particular slot. Sometimes it's how you speak, it's fair enough.
That's my husband.
No, sometimes it's how you speak. It's not for everyone, but for majority of people, especially if you're being asked questions, you're buying yourself time to come up with the answers because you don't readily know the answer. So, instead of saying, give me a minute to think, if you say, so what happened yesterday, right? Yeah, you're buying yourself time to answer the question in your mind before you can deliver it. However, if you practice, then you already know what you're going to say. You don't need any fillers in the middle of your conversation to have a very great conversation. I'm not saying that you're never going to and err. I mean, I would say nigh on impossible, but there's some people that have it down pat. But the more you practice, the more you're fully aware of what you're going to say, the more you know your content, the more you know the message you want to get across, the more familiar you are with it, the better and the easier it will be to deliver your message, the more impactful it will be, because every single word you're saying is adding to your story. You're not, there are no long silences or there are no delayed words trying to, put in extra words that you hadn't already thought about. I used to actually try and wing a lot of conversations, or a lot of times when I've been called to speak publicly, I try and wing it. I'm a talker, so I can wing some things, but I think there was one time where I was called out so badly, and I think that was the last time I ever winged a conversation. It was so terrible. I think I had like half an hour and I was done in like 10 minutes or something like that. And it was because I hadn't written anything down. In my head, I had prepped, but prepping in your head, write it down, say it, look at yourself in the mirror, talk to yourself. Imagine you're the audience, talk to yourself in the mirror, record it, play it back to yourself. And sometimes you play it back and you think, but why did you say that? That's not even relevant to your story. And then you remove that bit, you don't mention it again. But I think it is really important to practice, especially because you have a short space of time. We're in an age of social media. Everybody's attention span is 7 seconds. When you get them for longer, you're just so amazed. So you need to get your message across as soon as you can, as in, succinct as you can, in the best possible way. And I think practicing when we were growing up, my parents always used to say, practice makes perfect, right? Actually, that is true. So
I actually don't agree with that. I think practice makes permanent. Because if you are practicing the wrong thing, It
Yeah, but
doesn't make perfect.
you're still gonna be
You're
perfect at it.
perfect at the wrong thing. Yeah, it just makes you permanent at the wrong, So yeah, okay, I get you. I mean, but I
Yeah.
think that it's more. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, J Health Tips was asking what the question was. The question was I was asking why we needed to practice, but I think you probably got that by the end of what Wonu
Yeah.
had to say. When we've got a question here, does
Okay.
every story need sharing? Aren't some things private?
Some things are very private. However, having said that, there's some stories that you know that they're not. It would be wrong. Let me give you an example. It would have been wrong for me to not share um, the information about my cleaner or the information about not having access to my husband's account. Because for sure, ever since I've said it, I've had a lot of women come up to me to say, I don't have access to my husband's account. If you hadn't said that, I wouldn't have known to do so. And so when you hear that, it validates your sharing. So because you know that there are other people in the situation that you're in. So when you're going through the story, for example, you know that you really don't want this to happen to somebody else. You really, really don't want it to happen to somebody else. If it's not, really intimate, like really intimate details of your life or your partner's life, if they don't mind, and you don't mind sharing it because you know that it will be of benefit to somebody else, then in my opinion, I think you should share that story. Because at the time when I was going through what I was going through, honestly, I thought if I can just get one, if I can just have one less person go through this, then I would have done a good job, because it was such a painful experience that I really just didn't want it to ever happen to anyone again, ever. Even my enemy, I didn't want it to happen to them, because it took away from what was going on. It was just needless, I'm open and honest enough to say, yes, it was an error on my part. And because I don't want it to happen to you, I'm okay with sharing it. Now, if the story is more intimate, there are some things that you're not comfortable sharing, or the person in it with you is not comfortable with you sharing it, then by all means, please don't share the story. But if you're comfortable enough and you feel convicted enough that what you went through shouldn't happen to somebody else, then I think you should share that story.
So you're almost saying, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that we should share if it will benefit someone else. So
100%.
because obviously in this age there's a lot of oversharing, in stuff that maybe we don't need to be sharing. Like you said, what we ate for. I mean, maybe there's stuff we don't need to be sharing, and maybe there's even stuff that's more intimate that really doesn't need to be shared.
I
But
agree.
effectively, if it will bless someone, and we know
Yes.
that it particularly will help someone on their own
Yeah.
journey, then we
Yeah.
should continue and
Yeah.
share it.
So I'm not
So I
sharing
think
because obviously I want to say that I'm not sharing it to brag, or I'm not sharing it to brag. I'm not sharing it because I'm trying to say I'm penniless. I'm not sharing. No, I'm not sharing it for. I feel like the reason is weighty enough. It's gonna be
the
benefit.
motive behind sharing it is
Exactly. The motive. Exactly. The motive is to help somebody else. Not to be in the same predicament that I was in. And I think if you feel like, even if it's just one person that doesn't go through that experience, I think you owe it to that one person to share that story. Because now, if you guys want to know about lasting power of attorney, I'm your girl. The lawyers are going to try and charge you £600 like they tried to charge me, which was the reason why I didn't do it in the first place. Holla out your girl. It's only like £82 on the internet. Just let me know. I'm here for you. Send me a DM. I got you.
yeah, you can DM Wonu, she will answer. Yes, I guess it's really about. So I guess telling your story is more. I know. I think Dr. Zoe came on the Hangout Cafe right at the beginning to talk about sharing your story and how every story is relevant and that sort of stuff. But I think maybe it's not only is it therapeutic for you personally, but it's also about how it's.
Affects
I
others.
think it's about people knowing that they're not in there. You're in this with somebody else. You're not alone in what you're going through, because whatever you're going through, somebody
Exactly.
has probably gone
Exactly.
through, is going through, knows someone who has been through whatever. And I think
Exactly.
sometimes we can be quite isolated. So
Yes.
hearing other
Yes.
people's stories.
Yes, especially as let me speak for myself. So for me, I internalize quite a lot. I don't think I realized how much until Balaji's accident. So I've been internalizing about a lot of things, my career, just life in general. What have I done with my life? And, and because I love my job, I work a lot. And then when Miss Christina came on and she was like, yep, I worked too hard when I was younger. I was like, yes, finally somebody's saying what I think I've been trying to say to myself. But I wasn't brave enough to just own it. I just thought, well, I just need to work because that's how I'm going to get better or whatever. But it was liberating. And I think I sent her a message on Instagram that day. And I think I said to her, I said, your story just liberated me. I was so liberated from when she said it, because she was just like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That boss was just not right. I should have left him like 5 years before I did. I just found it so liberating, and that is what sharing your story does. As I said, I'd never met her before. I didn't know about her before. But because she was gutsy enough to come online and share that story, it liberated me. It was just amazing. So, and that's what storytelling does. If your story is impactful enough in the way you share it, I mean, there's some stories that are just amazing, right? Barack Obama became the first Black president of America. There's just some stories that are like that they're going to be what they are. But that's not to say that even though your story is not so, big, quote unquote, is not impactful. So I mean, all she said was, I feel like I worked for my boss for too long. That was it. And that touched me. So chances are what you went through and the reason why you're telling your story is really not for you, it's for somebody else. And it's really for somebody else to realize that actually I'm not alone. It happened to this ordinary girl who was just walking around on a Saturday afternoon. And if she can come through it, then I can too.
And I think you said earlier that's, sorry to interrupt you, it's also like if it affected just one person, because sometimes I think we're trying to like think, oh, is it going to affect the world?
Exactly.
How many people are going to move by this? But if it's one person, because you don't know who that one person is, and it could be one person, and who would have thought that it was just somebody admitting that they had worked for the wrong person for too long? That would make a huge difference, because when you think about it just out of context.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? But
I should add also that I wasn't saying that to say that I've been working in my job for too long. That was not where I was going. I should add that. That was not where I was going. But I think it was her vulnerability, I think, to just say that actually what I did, I think I shouldn't have. And I think that was just what the takeaway was. So it was just that she was using her job as an example. So yeah, that just wanted to add that real quick. Because I'm still in the job. Yes, just FYI, I love my job.
We know you love your job. That's why you work so hard at it. Okay, have we got any more questions? I think what we can do, Wonu, is just run through again the. Sorry, I'm just reading what J Health Tip said. Thanks for sharing messages. We need to know where something to run the home comes from and have access. Never mind if it's for the cleaner, food, electricity bill, etc. Thanks for sharing. So there you go, right there. You've
You're
I think
welcome.
it's I think design cocoa. Look. Thank you, Miss Christine. No, we're not. We're not.
We're aspiring.
We're aspiring. We're just trying. Okay, so I think it might be useful before we log off to just run through the tips again.
Okay.
So Cash, J Health, we've got it. To run through the tips again, just so that people know what it is that takes to make an impact. And remember when we were talking about this yesterday, I was challenging whether or not it should be impactful or if it should be captivating.
Yes.
And I don't know, we didn't touch on that now, but I don't even think we necessarily needed to, because we kind of went through, because I was arguing yesterday that I didn't think this story necessarily would be impactful, because I don't think impact is, what is impactful to one person is not necessarily impactful to another. And I was saying, but if it's captivating, then maybe you get more people. But I don't even think so. Okay, I don't know why I brought that up. Forget that. Delete.
It's relevant. Okay. It's relevant. I understand what you're saying. Okay, so you want to go over like the points. Okay, so
just summarize, because we're rounding up now. So if you just summarize on what you need, and then
Okay, so I think first of all, I'm going to change my words slightly. So what's your why? Why are you telling the story? Why do you think your story is, as they said, as somebody asked, why is your story not one that should be private? So if you're thinking of telling a story and you want to make it impactful, you want somebody to to gain something from it, because perhaps you went through something that you would rather someone else didn't. Know your why. Have some salient points that you want to get across when you're telling the story. Narrow down your key message. Know your audience. For people that speak quickly, don't speak too quickly. For people that do a lot of hand gestures, I know it's not necessarily hand gestures, I suppose. Try not to do anything or be anything that would distract from your story, basically. So, if I had come in here with eyeliner all over my face, like I'm going to say that again.
I thought you said you were going to do that. Didn't you say you were going to turn up with eyeliner all over
I
the
did,
place?
and then I chickened out. I chickened out at the last minute. But yeah, I mean, if you wear eyeliner all over your face naturally, then that's fine. But if you don't, don't do anything out of the ordinary, basically, is what I'm saying. That would make people spend too much time wondering what it is that you're wearing, doing that, and then they don't listen to the story that you're telling. Yeah, don't overwhelm your audience with unnecessary information. You determine what unnecessary information is. If your information isn't going to add to the impact of your story, then by all means, leave it out. If so long as you know the takeaway you want people to gain, then only give information that is going to add to that takeaway. What else did I say? Practice your story beforehand. Practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the more comfortable you are with your story. When you're comfortable saying something, then you deliver it better. You're not trying to fill in the blanks as you're talking, or trying to work out answers in your head in order to make the story, I don't know, longer or something. You're familiar with it, so you can deliver it better. Be authentic. There is absolutely nothing wrong with who you are. Please, guys, I've spent years, I should have gone to therapy. I've spent years and years and years trying to be comfortable who I am. It's, I haven't got enough hair, or, my lips are bigger than I would like them to be, or I don't smile enough. Just God made you the way you are because he loves you. He made you the way you are. There's absolutely nothing wrong with who you are. Be authentic, be yourself, be vulnerable. Nothing wrong with vulnerability either, especially if he asks you a story.
A lot of people think it's weakness, but I think vulnerability is strength.
Gosh, no, absolutely not. It's not weakness at all. I mean, I think there's something wrong if you know that, I mean, I think it would have been weird if after God sent a cleaner to my house, I was just like, and God sent a cleaner to my house. I mean, wouldn't that be like weird? But the vulnerability with I was just like, God, I didn't have money at that time, and this is what you did. I think it endears you to people. It makes your story more impactful. So I think just be you. Be who you are. If you come on as somebody else, people are gonna see right through you. So, and then in trying to decide who you are, they're not listening to what you're saying. So be yourself. Don't worry about it. You are good as you are. Trust me. It took me years to come to this conclusion. You are good as you are. Just be you. And yeah, the audience wants to hear from you. They came to hear from you, not who you think you should be, basically.
And the one that you didn't say is know your audience. I think that's the one you left out in your list.
Yes. Know who you're speaking to. Don't come on. If I had come on here and started talking to you people about tax, you would have wondered if you joined the wrong live session. So yeah, basically know your audience, know who you're talking to, and you're not going to know all of them, of course, but you're going to know majority, and then that will help you add anecdotes or tailor your story in a way that would be meaningful to the people that you're talking to.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you, Joy, for putting all of that
No,
down.
God bless you. That was so nice.
Thank you very much. You can send it all to me privately as well. Thank you. So we have it. Wonu, thank you so much. Thank you. I think we've done funky proud. I think we've done what she asked us to do. We didn't misbehave. I think we did well. To be fair, I actually think we did well because we could have gone a bit crazy, but we didn't. Hopefully, people have now got the message that their story is important. Every story is important. How you tell it is what makes the difference. How you can make it impactful. Yeah. That is down to you deciding on what the important parts are to take away, to give the information, what bits make it more exciting. Yes, if it's a somber story. But you see, the funny thing is that even with you talking about what effectively was a somber story, you weren't animated, but you brought enough in for it to be, good, to be impactful, to So I think it's just, I guess it's all about practice and, getting there bit by bit. So, yeah, so hopefully all of you on this session, will all be thinking about how you can tell your story in an impactful way. Just DM Wonu if you need the tips. I'll do them. Because just DM Wonu. But yes, I think it is important because I think you run the risk of not getting your message across if you don't do it in an impactful way. So it is important to tell it in an impactful way, unless of course you don't care if the message doesn't get across. If you actually want the message to get across, then it's worth your while doing it with these tips. So hopefully the next time you tell your story, you will add some of these in and it will be, So thank you very much for joining us. Please show Wonu a whole heap of love. She has come here again. We might invite you back, Wonu. We might.
Yay! Thank you, guys.
It's not my place to say, but I will recommend you.
No, I mean, twice in a year, honestly, if I never come back, I've done really well. So, no, thank you so much, Pastor Funke. God bless you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, guys. Joy, God bless you for this. Just doing this summaries. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Bye.